Hey Catherine, it's great to have you here in Switzerland. I'm really happy to be here with you and to be able to have a chat.
It is fantastic to be here. Thank you so much for having me and for all the hospitality of Wikimedia Switzerland.
Well, very welcome, very welcome. So tell me a little bit. I mean, we're completely now in the Wikimedia movement strategy process. So what is this all about, or what can you tell us here in Switzerland about what is happening right now in this process?
Absolutely. So for the last year or so, one of the things that we've been focused on as a global community is looking at our future. So we were founded in 2001, and Wikimedia over the last 17 years has really largely been a function of Wikipedia, thinking about how to grow the encyclopedia that most people know and use. And when we turned 15 years old, one of the questions that we asked ourselves was, well, what next? I mean, we can and should continue to improve the encyclopedia, but it's not the only way to think about free knowledge. And in fact, even with all its popularity and all the people who use it day in and day out, we're still missing a large number of people and all this different knowledge. And so what should we take on as our next task? So we launched the Wikimedia movement strategy process, or Wikimedia 2030, looking into the future, and spent a year talking to the global community and looking at trends in the world, demographic trends, technology trends, trends in education, and came to this realization that one of the places that Wikipedia can be really valuable is by embracing the fact that we are already essentially this incredibly critical part of the open knowledge ecosystem that is bigger and richer than Wikipedia alone. And so how do we embrace this role as the essential infrastructure for free knowledge? And then how do we move forward in the direction of really building that out, while also keeping in mind how we should think about knowledge equity, which is this idea that we want to include more people in the production of knowledge and more different people, as well as what we call knowledge as a service, which is how do we make knowledge not just available, but useful and in ways that people can learn more richly from it. So that was where we got to at the end of October. Since then, what we've been working on is what changes do we need to make in our movement in order to be successful with this? And so today we're in a place of talking about, okay, well, what kind of resources do we need? What sort of partnerships do we need? What kind of voice do we want to have in public? And all those conversations are happening with our global communities right now, and hopefully we'll have some answers.
I mean, for us here in Switzerland, we obviously also participated actively in that strategy process, and also the different questions that were asked, etc. But it's always as well interesting to learn more about all of this, because obviously we sit in a country where a lot of things are already happening and already there. And I guess we also have to think about what's happening outside. So we're always in Switzerland asking ourselves, well, what can we bring to the world outside? How can we contribute, for example, be it, financially or otherwise, to other countries, so that really this knowledge equity and knowledge as a service, as you mentioned, is really put in place.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that? What should be our role, do you think, in future, in terms of collaborating as well with other chapters, working together, be it in terms of programmatic approaches, or be it in terms of fundraising, as we discussed before,
Yeah, I mean, I can think of three things right off the bat. One is, here is a country that has spent a lot of time thinking about how do you bring different language communities together with sort of different cultural identities and build a cohesive or coherent whole. That's one of the things that we are definitely always trying to do at Wikimedia. And this is a very unusual Wikimedia affiliate in that you actually have multiple different communities under one roof that are in dialogue with each other. So that's a skill set that I think the rest of the community can learn from. The other one, as we talked about, was around fundraising. I think that one thing that we as an organization can really spend some time thinking about is how specifically organizations that do what I think of as programmatic work, they do outreach, they do sort of active education, they're working with institutions and partners, they tend to be eligible for raising money that the websites themselves might not have access to.
Exactly.
So how do we think about that in a way that benefits not just community in Switzerland, but
exactly
the global community?
Exactly.
And I think there's a real skill set there. And then the third thing is, honestly, I think, the Swiss community is already doing some of this through, it's a member of the Swiss community who created Kiwix, which is the platform that allows for us to build offline Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, an essential part of thinking about knowledge equity, which is getting people access to knowledge, even if they don't have the rest of the infrastructure to be able to access it. And so that thinking that emerged out of Switzerland is a real actual tangible thing that is now in the world that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are using. And it also shows that there's a mindset internal to the Swiss community that looks to the outside world to start.
Since I've arrived, I'm really trying to focus on a strategic approach and really see where we can have an added value, where we can do things that a volunteer alone would have difficulty with, which is typically partnering with bigger organizations or looking a little bit, over our own plate and going into the other chapters and not reinventing the wheel, really building up on other languages as well that we share, where we can do something together. But I think the very important thing as well is how do we approach different countries, because I mean in the last 20 years or so, with humanitarian aid and whatever happened, there was a lot of this thinking of, hey, we have some knowledge here, let's bring it outside, but I think now it's more about, and that's a lot what has been discussed as well lately, is really like how do we get this knowledge that is actually in the field into innovation, into creative thinking, and how can we then as a country maybe from here support that, and maybe it could be like having creative brainstormings as well in these countries, or just supporting it not only financially but going there and maybe, I don't know, speaking together with the people so that there can be emerging solutions directly as well from these different countries where we want to build things up. And I think maybe that could be also for us here in our countries to play not only Switzerland but all the other well-established chapters in Europe, which are around since a while, and to find a model that really works and tap into resources and things that we can really build something up.
And I think it's not just what can we give, because there is certainly a lot of learning that has happened within the more established organizations that have been around longer. And a lot of that learning has been on how do you, as a group of volunteers who are really good at editing encyclopedias, also be really good at running organizations or handling partnerships. And we've got a lot of experience in our communities, particularly in Europe. It's also, what do you get and how do you respond? So one of the things that we've heard from our emerging communities in particular, and those tend to be communities in lower income countries or communities where internet access is less prevalent, is, look, it also just works differently in those countries. And so some of the things that work for us in North America or in Europe aren't going to be as successful in places like South Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa. And so what I'm also interested in is, what can we as mature communities, what can we change about the way that we work in order to be more responsive to the needs of our colleagues? And perhaps the structures that we've built over time really were structures that served the needs of these mature economies with great infrastructure. And maybe we need to make some changes in order to make a more level playing field for all of our communities.
That's an interesting thought as well, thinking about how to develop an organization, but maybe inviting some outside perspectives and on how this should run and what should be done, basically. That's true. But I mean, for us here in Switzerland, I mean, we obviously follow the same, not the same maybe, but a relatively streamlined approach, looking at GLAM, which would be galleries, libraries, archives and museums. And we also do obviously a lot for the community, trying to get innovation out, as you said, like Kiwix, which now created its own association basically. But then we also do look at education. I think that for me is a really interesting and new field, because there's so much to do there, because with education, in an educated world, knowledge, I think, can spread easier, but people have to know and have to be educated, basically.
And there's so many layers. I mean, I completely agree. There's a really great prototype now for how we do work with Wikipedians in residence through the GLAM program. I'm really excited about not just GLAM, but also STEM. How do we get Wikimedia more involved in technical and engineering and science organizations? So there's a good model there, and we've learned a lot from that model. But education has been a tougher place to really dig in, and I think some of the reason for that has been every educational system is different.
Yes.
But what's interesting to me is that the needs of learners are often not. So every educational system is different. Some operate at national levels, some operate through federated models, some have sort
like
of
us here in Switzerland.
Right.
Everything's different.
Everything's different. And so then if that's the case, it becomes often very tricky because there's no one size fits all solution.
No.
But what is exciting to me about Wikipedia and education is that the needs of people who are learning tend to be pretty consistent. People have a need for deep learning, people have a need for sort of fast facts, people have need for sort of context and comprehension. And we also find that distribution of people who learn through reading or people who learn through more visual stimulation or people who learn through doing tends to be pretty equally distributed no matter where you are in the world. And then everybody needs digital literacy.
Exactly.
We offer learning, we offer knowledge that people can learn from, but then how can we get people, and particularly educators, involved in using Wikipedia as sort of a pedagogical tool? Where they're using it to learn about where knowledge comes from, who creates it, the epistemological underpinnings of knowledge in Wikipedia, but then also digital literacy and media literacy. Do we trust these sources? You know, what makes a good source or resource?
That's a really important thing. How do you deal with all this information that is accessible?
Exactly.
Which for us, I mean, when I grew up, there was no internet basically.
It wasn't that hard.
No, exactly. It was like, okay, we
go
just
to the library, don't go to the library.
Exactly.
Read the newspaper, don't read the newspaper.
Exactly. But nowadays everything is kind of there, you know. I mean, I see it with the youngsters today. They just believe everything that's out there. Whereas me, you know, I'm on different news sources just to see whether what they say is like contradictory or where it comes from or whatever. And I think that's also something that we need to take care of. Also, this way of collaboratively working on projects and an ethical use of internet or an ethical use of what we do there, because I do think that this can create a lot of job as well.
So there's digital literacy in the sense of like learning how to produce for the web, because the web is such a consumption product these days. But I also think that the more that we have people engaged in education, editing Wikipedia, so young people in particular, actually the more we're going to learn from them.
Of course.
Right? Because it is true that, you know, we can say the web has changed and now we have to have all these different skills, but I also think that we might need to change as Wikipedia. We might need to be responding to the way that younger people seek information.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't mean our commitment to being accurate or, you know, being open has to change. But how might we evolve in order to respond to the needs of people who don't remember a pre-internet time because they just have a totally different way of triaging information.
No, exactly. I don't think we can start from ourselves. We just need to...
And it's young people all over the world. This is the other super exciting thing for me. I find that young people in Switzerland are learning in similar ways to young people in Ghana. You know, it doesn't matter that one person lives in an environment with high network infrastructure and one with low, because both of them are coming onto the internet as not first generation users, but folks who don't have a pre-internet context. And so they're both engaging in that information ecosystem from the same position of it being
That's true.
Their
That's
life,
true.
their default life.
That's true. That's true. That's true. It will change anyways, you know, internet will become more accessible as well in all countries around the world, basically. Already now, I mean, there's a huge mobile phone usage in emerging countries and other countries, basically. So that's something as well that we could tap into and see. Maybe we have to even break down borders, you know, even in our whatever world here. Our communities as well, yeah, so that we can more service, you know, as you said, you know, or become a service to knowledge and to everything that we do. Because, yeah, I mean, we have this value of diversity, and it's true that here in Switzerland it is pretty particular. I mean, we, even at our board meetings, we speak English, which is not the language of anybody.
Really?
Yeah, because
you have so many different languages.
Yes, because there's one Italian speaker, there's French speakers, and also German German speakers, and the one common language would be English, but then not all of them speak English. So that's really a very funny situation. And usually, you know, you would say, like in public institutions, like speak whatever you want.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can come from that perspective and say, okay, maybe we understand each other. In Switzerland, these cultures are really different. So you have to approach them in a different way. The way they see things, the way they do things is very different, and all that in one country. So that's really interesting and a challenge for us. That's why we, for example, work virtually, because it wouldn't make sense to put an office somewhere, because
there's
then,
no one
you don't serve then the other community or the other half of the country. And so that's why we work how we work, but it doesn't make it easier, because every time you want to do a national event, you have to take care that it's somewhere where all the people can join, and that which language you speak or how you do things, or that it really attracts people from everywhere. So that's why Wikidata is super exciting, because it doesn't matter, it doesn't have any language, you know? So that's pretty nice.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, basically what you just talked about in terms of describing Switzerland is Wikipedia in a nutshell. You know, nobody speaks the same language. There's no way to get everyone in one place. If we put an office anywhere, it's not going to represent the majority of the people. And so I think there's so much to learn from the experiences that you just described. But what I love about it is that the way that Wikimedia Switzerland is solving for them is exactly the way that we at Wikipedia are trying to solve for some of these challenges. So it's really interesting.
It's funny. I mean, we have a lot of pitfalls, obviously, and we try to do things in the best way possible, right? But even we as a team, we always think about, so, okay, where do we meet? You know, where do we have our next General Assembly? So it has to be one time in one location, one time in the other, so that it's really very equitable as well, and that we don't make people travel too much, basically.
That's so funny. But I agree with you. I mean, I'm so excited about Wikidata. I know that we have a long ways to go and it is a work in progress and all of that, but I just really fundamentally think that Wikidata is so complementary to all the work that's been done with Wikipedia and has the opportunity for us to really open up knowledge in ways that just, you know, I don't like the term scale, but essentially go beyond where we are today by bringing in other institutions, by thinking about how the concepts that exist in Wikidata relate to other places and other open knowledge in the world, by thinking about how do we welcome in, as we were talking about, not just the glams, but the stems, by thinking about how do we connect to the broader sort of library ecosystem and reference ecosystem. And then, of course, it's all, as you said, it doesn't have a language. Which makes it so great in the sense of being truly sort of equitable.
The way things are connected, also the way you can search for things and data and stuff like that, it's really, really exciting.
It's really, someone told me that if Wikidata works, it'll make Wikipedia look like a prototype. And I thought, oh dear, well, that's quite a statement. But I think that, you know, that's the sort of ambition that I think our communities can and should have, is when we talk about a world in which every single human can freely share in the sum of all knowledge, Wikipedia gets us part of the way there. But then this is where the sort of strategy idea came from, which is how do we build on what has come before? How do we build on Wikipedia to actually really take on that idea of all knowledge?
That's true, that's true. What do you think would be the most important challenge in the next years to come? I mean, challenge that would also affect us, obviously, here in Switzerland.
I hate to say this, but I think it's a question of content diversity and contributor diversity. It's also something we've been struggling with for a while, is how do we bring more people into our communities and how do we make sure they feel welcome when they're there? And I think until we can, you know, so to say, crack that nut, we're going to continue to sort of run up against these walls. We can do great work from a technical innovation standpoint. We can do cool things with Wikidata, but we want people to feel like they can come and contribute to Wikipedia and that they know how. I think that's another thing. You know, it is complicated and complex. So how do we create better ways for people to learn how to do this? How do we make it for friendly communities where people can join? And I honestly believe if we can do that, we can do everything else that we want to do. That, I think,
and you're very right. I mean, speaking about this challenge, it's exactly the same that we're tackling here, basically. It's really this retention also. It's not so much like interesting people and going to one event, but then how do you keep them? How do you really motivate them to stay there and to move forward? And that's what is so exciting as well with Wikidata, because there's a whole lot of new people running around. It's really exciting, and to be able to be part of that, basically, to build build that up and to see where it heads. But you're right, and I mean, if we can reach out more and work closer, even together in future, that would be really wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's additive, not subtractive. The communities that we're part of today are remarkable. How do we invest in all of the great things about it, and then how do we bring more people in?
Exactly.
That is the challenge, and it is the opportunity. And then, beyond that, then the questions are things like, how do we reach more people? I mean, those are good problems to have. So, the internet is in a weird place right now. I'll just be honest. Like, not everything on the internet is great.
No.
It is consolidated. You have questions about your privacy. You're wondering why you're seeing the information you're seeing. You don't know if you should trust the information. It's full of harassment. It's a tough place, but I have to be honest, every time I think about what we get to do at Wikimedia and the impact it has on people's lives and the potential for us to just increase that impact, I get super excited.
True. It is a great opportunity, basically, to be part of that and to be able to shape something together in a way which we believe is the right way, right?
Well, I mean, I think what's so neat about it is, in some ways we've just kind of been doing our thing for almost 20 years now, and the internet's completely changed, and we're just still doing our thing. And it turns out the thing that we've been doing, people really appreciate. They appreciate the fact that we're not selling their data. They appreciate the fact we don't even collect their data.
And we're independent.
That we're independent, that we are non-commercial, that we have more in common with a library than we do with a website. I think
and
that
I
really
guess
matters.
we're just normal people.
And that we're just normal people.
Exactly.
It's true.
Not only bots walking around or whatever,
Yeah, just normal people.
Yeah,
teachers and librarians and mechanics. And, Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
I agree.
Well, thanks, Katherine. Thanks for being here and for your time.
No, it's such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.